Margaret lived alone in a small, old cottage at the edge of a quiet village. Her husband had died years ago, and she got by on a small pension. Life was hard, but Margaret always tried to stay kind and hopeful. One freezing winter night, as Margaret was getting ready for bed, she heard soft cries coming from outside her door. She quickly wrapped herself in a shawl and opened the door. What she saw made her heart stop. On her porch, inside a basket, was a tiny baby wrapped in a thin blanket. The baby was shaking from the cold, his little face pale and lips blue. "Oh no," Margaret whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. Without thinking twice, she picked up the baby and brought him inside. She placed him close to the fire to warm him up and gave him milk from a bottle she quickly prepared. As the baby's trembling slowed and his cries quieted, Margaret felt a wave of love and protectiveness wash over her. Who would leave such a fragile child out in the freezing cold? Why here on her doorstep? She didn't have answers, but one thing was clear. This baby needed help, and she couldn't turn him away, even though she barely had enough for herself. "Heaven must have sent you to me," she said softly, gently stroking his cheek. "I'll take care of you. You're mine now." Margaret named the baby Ethan and vowed to raise him as her own. Though life would be even harder with another person to care for, she didn't hesitate. The next morning, Margaret woke up earlier than usual. Ethan lay asleep in a makeshift crib she had fashioned from an old wooden box lined with soft blankets. She watched him for a moment, marveling at how peaceful he looked despite the cold night he'd endured. But reality soon set in. Margaret knew raising a baby would be difficult, especially for someone her age and with so little money. Still, she refused to let doubt creep in. "We'll figure it out," she told herself firmly. One day at a time, she started by asking neighbors for help. Mrs. Harper, who lived down the road, gave her baby clothes her grandchildren had outgrown. Mr. Thompson, the baker, promised to save leftover bread for her whenever he had extra. Slowly but surely, Margaret pieced together what she needed to care for Ethan. Every penny mattered. Margaret cut back on her own expenses, eating smaller meals and wearing patched-up clothes so she could buy formula and diapers for the baby. On cold nights, she bundled Ethan tightly in her shawl, holding him close to keep him warm. Despite the hardships, Margaret never complained. Seeing Ethan smile or hearing his laughter made every sacrifice worth it. "You're my miracle," she often whispered to him as she rocked him to sleep. As the months passed, Ethan grew into a healthy, happy toddler. He followed Margaret everywhere, helping her pick vegetables from the garden or waving at neighbors when they visited. Everyone in the village adored him, and they admired Margaret even more for her strength and selflessness. One day, while playing outside, Ethan found a small bird lying on the ground. His wing was hurt, and it chirped weakly. Without hesitation, he ran to Margaret, holding the bird gently in his hands. "Mama, can we fix it?" he asked, his big eyes full of concern. Margaret smiled, touched by his compassion. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's take care of it together." They nursed the bird back to health over several weeks, feeding it and keeping it safe until it was strong enough to fly away. The day they released it, Ethan clapped his hands joyfully, watching it soar into the sky. "You saved him, Mama," Ethan said proudly. "No, we saved him," Margaret corrected, hugging him tightly. "Kindness is always better when we share it." That moment stayed with Ethan as he grew older. Margaret taught him not just how to survive, but how to live, with love, humility, and gratitude. Though they didn't have much, their home was filled with warmth and laughter. What neither of them realized was that this foundation of love and kindness would shape Ethan's future in ways neither could imagine. As the years went by, Ethan grew into a bright and curious boy. Margaret did everything she could to nurture his potential, even though resources were scarce. She read him stories from old books she found at yard sales, taught him math using pebbles in the garden, and encouraged him to ask questions about the world around him. School became Ethan's gateway to new opportunities. Though they lived modestly, Margaret ensured he had clean clothes and packed lunches for school every day. On weekends, she walked with him to the library in town, where he devoured books on science, history, and adventure. Knowledge is your ticket to a better life, Margaret often told him. Never stop learning, no matter what. Ethan took her words to heart. He excelled in his studies, earning praise from teachers and respect from classmates. But as he grew older, he began to wonder about his origins. "Mama, why don't I look like you?" he asked one evening while they sat together on the porch. Margaret hesitated for a moment, then smiled softly. "Because you came to me as a gift. I found you on my doorstep when you were just a tiny baby. But that doesn't change anything. You're my son in every way that matters." Ethan nodded, satisfied with her answer. Over time, he stopped asking questions about his past and focused instead on making Margaret proud. When he turned 12, Ethan got a part-time job helping Mr. Thompson at the bakery after school. He saved every penny he earned, determined to ease Margaret's burdens. One Christmas, he surprised her with a handmade scarf he'd knitted during his free time. "I made this for you," he said shyly, "to keep you warm in the winter." Tears filled Margaret's eyes as she hugged him tightly. "It's perfect, sweetheart. Thank you." Though life was still hard, their bond only grew stronger. Ethan admired Margaret's resilience and selflessness, vowing to repay her someday for all she had done. Meanwhile, Margaret marveled at the kind, hard-working young man he was becoming. What neither of them knew was that Ethan's determination and brilliance would soon lead him far beyond their small village, and set the stage for an extraordinary reunion years later. By the time Ethan turned 18, he had earned a reputation as one of the brightest students in his school. His teachers encouraged him to apply for scholarships, believing he had the potential to achieve great things. Margaret, though quietly nervous about letting him go, supported his dreams wholeheartedly. "I'm so proud of you," she told him one evening as they filled out college applications together. "Your future is bright, Ethan. Don't ever forget that." Ethan smiled, but his heart ached at the thought of leaving Margaret behind. "What will you do without me?" he asked teasingly, trying to lighten the mood. "I'll manage," Margaret replied with a wink. "Besides, I'll have your letters and calls to keep me company." True to her words, Ethan stayed in touch after moving to the city for college. He worked multiple part-time jobs to cover living expenses while excelling in his studies. His passion for innovation led him to pursue entrepreneurship, and by his senior year, he had developed an app that streamlined supply chain logistics, a project that caught the attention of investors. Within a few years, Ethan founded his own company. It grew rapidly, earning him wealth beyond what he or Margaret had ever imagined. Despite his success, Ethan remained humble, remembering the values Margaret had instilled in him: kindness, hard work, and gratitude. But there was something else Ethan kept hidden. He hadn't told Margaret about his fortune. Instead, he sent her small gifts occasionally, like new kitchenware or warm coats, claiming they were discounts he'd found. He wanted to surprise her when the time was right. Meanwhile, Ethan began searching for answers about his biological parents. Through private investigators, he discovered that his father, Charles Whitmore, was a wealthy businessman who had abandoned him due to personal struggles decades ago. Though hurt by the revelation, Ethan decided to meet Charles, not out of anger, but to understand. Their meeting was emotional. Charles tearfully apologized for abandoning Ethan and explained how regret had haunted him for years. Learning about Margaret's sacrifices moved him deeply. "She saved my life," Ethan told Charles, "and now it's my turn to repay her." Together, they devised a plan to honor Margaret in a way she would never expect. Little did Margaret know, her quiet act of love 20 years ago was about to come full circle, with a reunion that would change her life forever. 20 years after that freezing winter night, Margaret's life remained simple but content. She spent her days tending to her garden, knitting blankets for the local shelter, and occasionally visiting neighbors. Though Ethan called often, she missed having him close by. One crisp autumn afternoon, as Margaret sat on her porch knitting, she heard the low rumble of an engine approaching. Looking up, she saw a sleek black car pull into her driveway. Her heart skipped a beat. Who could this be? The driver stepped out, tall and impeccably dressed, with a warm smile lighting up his face. It was Ethan, but not the same Ethan who had left home years ago. This Ethan carried himself with confidence, his eyes shining with gratitude and purpose. "Mom!" he called out, rushing toward her. Margaret stood, her hands trembling as he embraced her tightly. "Ethan, is that really you?" "It's me," he said, pulling back to look at her. "I'm home." Before she could ask why he'd come or how his life had been, another figure emerged from the car, a distinguished-looking man in his late 50s. He approached slowly, his expression soft yet emotional. "Mrs. Margaret," the man began, his voice thick with emotion. "My name is Charles Whitmore. I believe you know my son." Margaret froze, confusion washing over her. "Your son?" Charles nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. "20 years ago, my wife and I made a terrible mistake. We abandoned our newborn baby because we thought we couldn't provide for him. But fate intervened. You found him, saved him, and gave him the love and life we never could." Margaret's hand flew to her mouth as realization dawned. Ethan, the boy she had raised as her own, was the biological child of this wealthy man standing before her. "We've spent years searching for him," Charles continued. "When we finally found him, he told us everything. How you sacrificed so much to give him a home, how you worked tirelessly to ensure he had a future. Mrs. Margaret, we owe you everything." Ethan stepped forward, taking Margaret's hands in his. "Mom, I didn't tell you sooner because I wanted to surprise you. Thanks to your love and guidance, I built a successful business, and now I want to take care of you. You deserve nothing less than the best." Margaret was speechless, tears streaming down her face. All these years, she had believed Ethan was simply a gift from heaven, sent to bring light into her lonely life. Now, she realized their bond was even more extraordinary than she'd imagined. As Charles promised to repay her kindness and Ethan vowed to honor her sacrifices, Margaret felt overwhelmed, not by wealth or recognition, but by the knowledge that her act of love had changed not only one life but two families forever. The days following the reunion were a whirlwind of emotions for Margaret. Ethan and Charles wasted no time in showing their gratitude, but they did so with thoughtfulness and respect for her humble lifestyle. First, Ethan arranged to renovate Margaret's cottage. He didn't turn it into a mansion. Instead, he updated the plumbing, installed central heating, and added modern appliances while keeping its cozy charm intact. "I want you to be comfortable, Mom," Ethan explained when she protested. "This is still your home. It's just a little brighter now." Next, Charles insisted on paying off any debts Margaret had accumulated over the years. "Consider it a small token of apology," he said humbly. "We can never repay what you've done for our family, but we'll do everything we can to ease your burdens." But the most meaningful gesture came from Ethan himself. One evening, as they sat together by the fireplace, he handed her a small box wrapped in plain paper. "What's this?" Margaret asked, her voice trembling. "Open it," Ethan urged with a smile. Inside was a simple silver locket engraved with the words, "Forever my mom." Inside the locket were two pictures, one of Margaret holding baby Ethan, and another of them together as adults. "I wanted something that would remind you of how much you mean to me," Ethan said softly. "No matter where life takes me, you'll always be my mom, in every way that matters." Tears streamed down Margaret's face as she clutched the locket. "Ethan, I don't know what to say. This is too much." "It's not enough," Ethan replied firmly. "Nothing could ever truly repay what you've given me. A home, a family, and a future I never dreamed possible." To honor her legacy of kindness, Ethan and Charles established a foundation in Margaret's name. The foundation provided resources and support for struggling families and abandoned children, inspired by the love and sacrifice Margaret had shown all those years ago. Margaret watched with pride as Ethan poured his heart into the project. "You're doing such good work," she told him one day. "Your father and I are lucky to have raised someone like you." Ethan smiled, hugging her tightly. "No, Mom, we're the lucky ones. You taught us both what really matters: love, compassion, and second chances." As Margaret looked around at her transformed life, the warm house, the loving son, and the newfound purpose she felt through the foundation, she realized something profound. Her act of kindness hadn't just changed Ethan's life. It had created ripples of hope and generosity that touched countless others. And though wealth and recognition were nice, the greatest gift of all was knowing she had made a difference. Years passed, and Margaret's story became a beacon of hope in her community. The foundation Ethan created in her name flourished, helping struggling families and abandoned children find stability and support. It wasn't just about financial aid. It was about giving people the tools and encouragement to build better lives for themselves. Margaret often visited the foundation's headquarters, sharing her experiences with those who came seeking help. "Life is hard," she would say gently, "but kindness always finds a way to grow, even in the toughest soil." Her words inspired countless individuals to persevere, knowing they weren't alone. Ethan, now a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist, continued to honor his mother's values. He traveled the world, expanding the foundation's reach and ensuring that no one had to face hardship without support. Though his schedule was busy, he made time to visit Margaret regularly, bringing her stories of the lives they had touched together. One day, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Margaret turned to Ethan with a contented smile. "You've done so much good, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. I couldn't have done any of it without you," Ethan replied, taking her hand. "Everything we've built started with your courage and love. You saved me, not just from the cold that night, but from a life without family or purpose." Margaret shook her head modestly. "I only did what anyone should do, care for someone in need. But look at what it led to, a lifetime of blessings for both of us." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Margaret reflected on her journey. From the freezing winter night when she found Ethan to the thriving foundation that bore her name, every moment had been a testament to the power of love and sacrifice. Ethan stayed by her side until the stars began to twinkle in the night sky. Before leaving, he kissed her forehead and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." Margaret watched him drive away, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. She knew her legacy would live on, not just through Ethan, but through every person whose life they had touched. And so, their story became more than just a tale of kindness. It became a reminder that even the smallest acts of love can create ripples of change that last for generations. And that's the end of the baby she saved, Glowing Star. We hope this heartwarming story reminded you of the incredible power of love, sacrifice, and second chances. Margaret's journey shows us that even the simplest acts of kindness, like opening your door to a helpless baby, can create ripples of change that touch countless lives. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What did you think of the story? Did it inspire you or make you reflect on your own experiences? Where are you watching from? Are you tuning in from the US, India, the UK, or somewhere else in the world? Let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear about your corner of the globe. If you enjoyed this tale of gratitude and transformation, don't forget to subscribe for more stories that celebrate humanity, connection, and the beauty of making a difference. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue sharing these heartfelt narratives. Lastly, drop a comment below and share. Sparkles, what was your favorite moment in the story? Sparkles, have you ever witnessed or been part of a situation where kindness changed everything? Thank you so much for joining us on this inspiring journey with Margaret and Ethan. We're grateful for your time and enthusiasm, and we can't wait to bring you more stories that uplift, inspire, and connect us all. Red Heart, until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and never underestimate the ripple effect of doing what's right.